Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, we've got a guest this week who claims to be an investable entrepreneur, or at least he's written a book on the subject.
Yeah, he's written a book on the subject. He's probably nowhere near an investable entrepreneur. Actually, if he's written the book, then you'd expect this man to know how it is or what he needs to do to actually raise capital for a new venture. Today, we're really privileged to have James Church from, and look, I'm going to show, if you're on video, that's his book, Investable Entrepreneur. James, welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
James, what is an investable entrepreneur?
Yeah, so obviously it's an entrepreneur that's investable, but the point of the book and the reason for calling it Investable Entrepreneur rather than investable business or something like that is because actually when you dig into what investors are looking for, they're looking for an entrepreneur who can execute on ideas, who can make ideas a reality. We can all have ideas. We can all come up with this next kind of business venture, this kind of app that should exist in the world and no one's thought of yet. It's hundreds, thousands, millions of people every day come up with something they think should be the next big thing, but only a handful of people try to execute on that. And an even smaller percentage actually go on to make it a success and turn it into a multi-million-dollar or even billion-dollar business. So really it's less about the idea. Great ideas don't raise investment, but great entrepreneurs do, great communication does, and that's what the focus of the book is how do you stop talking about just how great your idea is and how do you set the scene to make an investor want to back you individually, you personally as a founder.
Yeah, I was interested to listen to one of the guys I listened to help improve my knowledge, and it came from, this is a podcast that was raised about 20 years ago, but basically Dan Kennedy was talking about how when it comes to speaking, a lot of the speakers, it might not have been quite 20 years ago, but a lot of the speakers ditched PowerPoint because basically they found that PowerPoint was death when it comes to actually trying to attract people. You don't quite go there, do you? But basically one of the things about pitching an idea is, I mean, do you want to kill somebody with PowerPoint slides? I mean, that must be something that you caution against.
Yeah, so it's about telling a story and having a solid narrative and making sure the communication is there first and foremost, getting them engaged in the vision, the value proposition, getting them excited by the concept, and then transitioning that narrative into showing your credibility or your team's credibility, the process you've made to date. So it's all about storytelling. In the world of investment, and I totally agree, if you're presenting, you don't always necessarily need to bring up slides. But in the world of investment, it's often the case that the first thing, before an investor will agree to meet with you in person, they want to see a document, and they call that a pitch deck. And those pitch decks are usually PowerPoint documents, but really they're kind of somewhere between a presentation and a brochure, and it's just a top level overview covering sort of over 15 or so slides that just kind of sets the scene so that an investor wants to meet with you. And then when you would meet, you know the scenario is different. You're either in a boardroom and it would be appropriate to bring up some slides, but you don't want death by PowerPoint. It should be kind of a headline and an image, and then you tell your story around it. Or you're in a coffee shop and it would be weird to bring out your laptop and start going through some slides. You need to just be able to tell your story in an engaging way.
I think it was Frank Sinatra who said that all I need is a microphone and a spotlight. I don't think Frank Sinatra ever used PowerPoint, but if he did, then that would be a surprise. But no. So I think you can get a story across in a really compelling way with the power of the individual, and actually at the end of the day they're buying you as an individual, but I do get it that you sometimes need other things to support your pitch.
Yeah, the other thing about when you're sort of raising investment, it's a pretty nerve-wracking thing for founders. It's probably the biggest deal they've ever tried to pull off, and they're raising hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds. So they're under quite a lot of, they put themselves obviously under quite a lot of pressure in those moments. And it's important to have, like, there's different versions of these pitches, right? There's the pitch you send the investor that's like the brochure-esque form that they can just read through and get your business. But then there's something you might have as a backup to your presentation verbally, and that just gives you a few key points. You go, I need to talk about these three things. I can cover them in any way I want. I can go with the flow, but as long as I cover these three things, I've got it covered. And it just acts as a bit of reassurance for the founder to feel confident. And it also can help the investor just follow the journey a little bit more with a few visual aids. What's important, and I think where this sort of death by PowerPoint has come from, is within sort of the corporate world, within corporate presentations, and we've all been in those types of scenarios at networking events or at wherever, and someone's up on stage and they're presenting their concept, and they're literally just reading the PowerPoint slides. That's what you're not doing. What you should be doing is engaging and telling a story and using visuals.
If it was legal,
story.
If it was legal, though, James, what you would do in that situation is draw out a gun and shoot the presenter, wouldn't you? Because otherwise they're going to waste the next 20 or 30 minutes of your life.
Exactly. And it needs, so if you are in a position where you're presenting, what you need is something that maybe gives you a few kind of cues as to these are the three topics I need to cover, and have your own way of telling those stories, and read the room and adapt and change as you go, and that just comes with confidence. And I wrote this book 2-3 years ago now. I've been giving a presentation every week around this book, and I know it off by heart, and now I can kind of just present it. I don't need the slides, but the slides are there to act as a kind of a background, really.
The thing about the book is that you actually synthesize sort of 6 principles of the perfect pitch. Now, we're going to put that to the test here, because if you know the book, then I'm sure you'll be able to talk us through those 6 principles. Give us an idea of what they are.
Yeah, so the first phase is the preparation phase, and that's the first 2 principles, which is plan and projections. And this is all about making sure that you're adequately prepared for what happens after your pitch. So a lot of founders will go out and pitch, and then they'll be going through this due diligence process if they're successful with that pitch, and it'll all fall apart because they haven't got a credible financial model. They haven't got a believable business strategy that people can get behind. So make sure you've got the foundations in place to pitch from first. And then the middle sort of phase, the second phase, contains 3 of the principles, which are structure, content, and clarity. And this is where we start thinking about storytelling. And this is the narrative, the language we use. This is about thinking, what's the order we want to deliver the information? What's the structure of the story? And I use a 5-act structure in the pitches we create, and without going into too much detail, but it's kind of saying these 5 structures mirror that of a typical playwriting that's been used for centuries. Shakespeare was a massive fan of a 5-act structure, and we can kind of use those to create a rhythm and of the narrative in the pitch we deliver investors. Then you obviously need to write the content that you're going to deliver for each of those kind of acts, if you like, those 5 parts of the structure. And then we need to make sure that the information you're sharing is clear, concise, and articulate. So this is all about storytelling and making sure we get the message across first. We've not touched PowerPoint. We've not done any design work. And then the final principle is the design phase. It's the final principle is of course, the design. And we're creating the presentation, and we're sort of turning that into something visual that can engage people, as well as your own sort of spoken word and presentation.
If you had about
the, oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say that with these principles, if you've been teaching people these principles, people looking for investment, what's been your feedback? Has it been difficult for them to get their heads around it, or has it been, wow, that's made such a difference for us?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it's sort of an eye-opener, because I think most founders start with, I need to go out and pitch. So the first thing is they open up PowerPoint and they have these blank slides in front of them, and they go, right, now what? And then they start writing a business plan and trying to pass that off as a pitch, and they lose the investor because there's just too much information being shared. They're trying to cram everything in to show how clever they are, and it shows a lack of confidence. It does the complete opposite as to what they expect. Whereas when they take a step back and they go, if I have a full written business plan, I can feel more confident just sharing one little thing that's exciting and engaging. So when the investor says, tell me more about that after the presentation, you can talk about it in full because you've written it in your business plan. And you can also say, by the way, we've got the full detail in the business plan. more than happy to send that to you. So it allows you to create, going through these principles often allow our founders to feel more comfortable, more confident when presenting. Less is often more, and they feel more confident in doing that when they've got the foundations in place.
I don't know where I heard it though, and I don't know whether you've come across this as well, Kevin, but basically I heard the stat that says, and I think it came from the Shark Tank people over in America, but basically something like 90% of business plans that successfully raise money are not followed. So in other words, they get the money on the basis of the business plan, but then life happens, or the market changes, or whatever, and they pivot, they adapt, etc. So when you look back, the investors invested in something that isn't actually followed through. So
Yeah,
where does that leave an investor? And I don't know whether you picked that up in your own book.
it's not something I particularly focus on in the book, but it's kind of in there. But you're absolutely right. And businesses will pivot as you learn more about the market, what works, what doesn't work. And most early stage investors, those investing in the first few rounds of investment a founder might be looking for, aren't naive enough to think that the business, if this business is successful, it's going to look identical to the pitch if it does, it would be a miracle. It's going to be completely different to the thing that you end up with, the thing you exit at the end is going to be completely different to the thing you pitch to your first investors, almost certainly. So the point of the business plan and the projections aren't really at an early stage to predict your future. They're not there for you to they're not expecting you to have a crystal ball and be able to say exactly what things will look like in, say, 5 years' time. The purpose of them is more as a tool to allow investors to analyze your strategic thinking, how you operate as a founder, the things you think about, your areas of strength and weaknesses when it comes to parts of your business. Maybe it's very obvious you're really good at marketing and but not so good at operations, and that's a concern for them, and they want to see that you're bringing in an operational team to support you. And so being aware of your own kind of weaknesses of going, I'm nailed the marketing but I'm crap at operations, I need to bring in the first hire as a COO because I need that person on board. So it allows you to demonstrate your strategic thinking and your skill set, and your adaptability, and the fact that this is our plan of action in the short term, this is what our plan is in the longer term. We'll adapt, obviously, to market conditions and feedback, but it allows investors just an insight into that mind, and that's really what they're for. They're less about looking at your projections and saying, well, month 26, you said from raising investment, you said you'd be generating exactly this much revenue, and you haven't. It's not really about that. It's about showing your credibility, really.
Yeah. The number of business plans I've seen when it comes to actually raising money usually have next to nothing in the first couple of years, and then all of a sudden it's like they've found a gold mine. You know, and the sort of chart sort of goes up and up and up.
Sort of hockey stick growth.
It's obviously been put together by like something like an accountant or something like that, Kevin.
Right, actually, that's when my world starts, because one of the things that a finance leader will get involved in that process is managing the cash, the runway, as it's called. Now, when does the cash run out if we don't generate any revenue? It nearly always is that kind of hockey stick projection, and it's vital that you turn your cash flows positive as soon as possible.
Yeah, and even more so in the current climate with investing. You know, we're talking in sort of the second half of 2023, and obviously it's been a very interesting 12 months, and the climate's very much changed. We've gone through the COVID era. We're now in a cost of living crisis, and all of these things have had an impact on the way investors think and behave. And during the COVID period, there was this incredible boom. I think we saw something like a 30x increase in the amount of investment across Europe during COVID. And it just got a bit silly. Like PE firms, hedge funds were all kind of backing early stage startups in a way they never have before, muscling in on the VC space. And this was pushing up raise sizes and valuations, and it was the crazy kind of go big, go home strategy, build it and they will come, and people just pumping money into ideas with no real thought. And now we're in a position where we're sort of back to kind of the way investors in Europe operated pre-COVID, and they're much more considered. They're much more wanting to see your path to profitability has become a big kind of phrase to a lot of investors. How quickly can you make this profitable? How little money do you need invested to get into a break even or a cash flow positive position? And then from that base, we'll raise more investment and scale the business up. But it shouldn't be a case like the Ubers of the world that raised kind of 25 billion before they even made a profit. That day is long gone for most investors.
But in some ways, James, all that's happened with interest rates going up is that we've returned to normality. We've had 10 years of particularly low rates. It's the low rates that have gone before us that are the abnormality, not the 5% or thereabouts that we've got now. Because if you look back over 20, 30, 40 years and look at what the average rate of interest is, it's where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I try and explain to founders who are thinking about raising investment coming and they're sort of hearing these clickbait headlines of, there's been an X% drop year on year on investment. And I show them a graph of what the amount of investment in Europe looked like for the last 10 years. And then suddenly the perspective is, now's not the anomaly. Now's not the bad time. It was just the last 2 years were the anomaly, and they were crazy high.
Yeah.
And actually, when you compare to where we are now with, say, 2019, 2018, 2017, we're actually, you discount the first few years of 2020 of the 2020s, and actually we're at historically high levels for investment if you were to discount those 3 years of anomalies. So when you've got that longer term perspective and you've got a bit more time in the industry, you have a completely different perspective than a founder coming at it now, never kind of been in this world before, and they're reading all these stories of how compared to a year or 2 years ago, there's a lot less money being invested in startups. And it was just, we went through this sort of crazy boom period, and people were raising money at silly amounts of money at crazy valuations for a period of time.
Do you find that the investors, people seeking funding, have the ones who get their plans funded, are they better at storytelling than the ones that don't?
Yeah, I would say so. Obviously, all of our clients have been through our process, and as a result of that, all of our clients are like 40 times more likely to raise investment than the average founder. And that's all because we've taught them this process of storytelling, essentially the art of communication. But certainly if we were to look at our founders who are successful and those that maybe struggle a bit more, it is the ones that are better at the storytelling or are able to kind of execute on what we teach them better than those that can't. And I think it's such an important skill, and some people it takes a long time for them to get really good at it. But as a founder, as a CEO of a company, you're kind of the front of the brand. You're the face of the brand, and whether you're Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, or whether you're Tim Cook. Tim Cook had big shoes to fill, right? When it came to storytelling, Steve Jobs was an absolute master of pitching, and he's brought his own way of doing it. But it took him a couple of years to really start to get good at pitching Apple. Like his first few presentations, people were like, "What have they done putting Tim Cook in charge?" And he was a very different. He was more an operational guy than an entrepreneurial character, and it took a while for him to find his feet, even at the level with the resources of Apple behind him, to really kind of excite the world with his pitching. So yeah, it's a skill that takes time to learn.
One of the things in the book that I did notice towards the end there, James, I'm sure it's something you're still running, but you have, I would call it a lead magnet site. So in other words, somebody who's doesn't quite know whether they're pitch ready. You have something called pitchready.co.uk that enables people to say, I'm not really ready, or I'll just take this this sort of test. And when I'm saying it's a test, you can tell us a little bit more. What is this thing?
Yeah, so it's called the Pitch Ready Scorecard, and you access it from pitchready.co.uk, like you said. And it's a series of sort of 30 or so questions. It takes less than 5 minutes, but it asks you particular questions, and off the back of that, you'll get a score across 3 core categories, and an overall score kind of telling you how investor ready you are right now. And then you'll get a 12-page report detailing that score and giving you tips and advice on what you need to do to get yourself more investor ready. You also get a load of goodies as a result. You can get a free copy of my book. You can join a 90-minute fundraising strategy session that I run regularly. All of those sorts of things off the back of it. Loads of good advice and content from our team. But that's a really great way of just figuring out kind of, if I do want to do this, do I have what I need in place, or is there any gaps that are gonna?
Is that typically the front end of your acquisition of new clients?
Yeah, very much so. So yeah, it's my book is obviously a key driver, and that scorecard is a great way. People love to fill in quizzes and sort of test themselves and see where sort of benchmark themselves when it comes.
Do you have an idea of almost like before and after? I mean, they go in there and they think, oh Lord, got so much to learn, or maybe there are parts of it like they're really quite good, but there's other parts not. How does it work typically when you get the results of that and you're looking back? Does it give you an idea of the state of readiness across the market or in with your clients? So are you able then to understand how you can particularly help somebody that's filled it in?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing from our perspective is we get all the data, we get all of the answers that someone might have inputted. So when they contact us and they've sort of gone through a bit of a process and they've said, actually, I would like to explore working with you. From our side, we can go, well, we can see you're really strong on pitching, but you really struggle around the business strategy and the financials. So let's sort of focus the conversation around how we can help you there. Sure. And that really helps them identify the areas where they need to work on themselves, and that it also helps us to manage the conversations with them and make sure we're not talking to them about stuff they feel quite comfortable with. So yeah, from a pure sales and marketing perspective, it's a really useful tool as well.
And are they of a certain age then, James? Are they kind of 20s or their 30s? I mean, where do they sit in the age range?
So we have a very broad appeal in terms of we do a lot of stuff for free events, free books, free content, free downloads. That audience is broad from sort of the 20s all the way through to people in their 50s and 60s who are also starting businesses. Our client base tends to be more the kind of 35 plus. Most people in their sort of late 40s, I would say, generally speaking. That seems to be our sweet spot. Bit more kind of life experience, a bit more aware that bringing in a team of experts around them is going to get them to their goals quicker. Whereas we find and this is a big generalization, but we find the sort of the 20-something-year-old entrepreneurs are still in the kind of university coursework mindset, and they treat entrepreneurship more as a learning process, and they want to do everything themselves and learn everything themselves. So being a consultancy that does kind of done for you help, it tends to be the more experienced individuals that are like, yeah, I focus on the things I'm really good at, you do your thing. That's going to get me there quicker at the typical clients of ours. But
is your business model a share of the raise then?
No, we're purely a flat consultancy fee, because we're not involved in the negotiation. We're not brokering the deal. We can't really charge on a success fee basis. Also, investors tend to not like it because they want their money being spent on the plan for the future, not paying off the debts of the past. So it could be people like us, a broker, person who built your website, like all that you've suddenly committed.
Do you have a scale of charges, James, or is it you say it's a flat fee?
We've got different packages, different ways to engage with us. We've got stuff for sort of pre-seed and seed, stuff for sort of Series A and beyond. So we've got stuff all the way from like a 12-week investment readiness program, which is your kind of entry level, and you can kind of go through that and you can do it yourself with our guidance and support and templates. We've got kind of mentoring services that are a bit more involved, and then we've got a full done for you where our team, we've got ex-investors, business strategists, financial strategists that will all build all of this stuff I talked about earlier.
And how much let's just give us a broad ballpark. I mean, is it 50,000 or is it 10,000 or is it 1,000?
No, so if we take the kind of the 12-week program, that starts from sort of £795 for the 12 weeks. Mentoring's like 600 quid a month for a minimum of 3 months. And then the done for you, the most popular service is around 8.5K. If you want us to then do a load of investor outreach for you and do kind of outreach to thousands of investors on your behalf, They're sort of 12.5K for that, including all of the preparing of the materials, everything else included. So they're a typical ballpark. If you're talking to VCs and you're kind of doing 5, 10, 15 million pound rounds, then it's a slightly different kind of pricing structure. But,
sure.
Generally speaking, those sorts of things.
On the scale of it, the kind of advice that you're offering and the impact that you can make on people's plans, they're very reasonable rates, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. I mean, obviously, it's the eyes in the beholder, and it sort of often depends the person on the other end of the call as to their perception of value. But yeah,
what do you think, Kevin? I mean, you're quietly. I mean, he's the man with the money.
Well, it's an interesting subject, Graham. My interest isn't necessarily with that initial seed fund. Within the finance leaders that we talk to, they're often challenged with doing the Series A or the Series B, and that's a tough process. A lot of the finance leaders that we talk to are coming along and saying, "Oh, I'd like to move into this company," but they're looking for a finance leader that'll support them through this next round. I've never done a fundraise before. Can you help us, please? Yeah. So, James, that'd be a question there. In terms of those bigger rounds further down the line, do you get involved in the stuff that in some cases you'd expect the CFO to be doing?
Yeah, so this is where it starts to, once you get to sort of Series A, Series B plus, we tend to not get too involved in those rounds. We're focused on those first 3 rounds, pre-seed, seed, Series A. At that point, they don't tend to have a CFO in-house. They don't, they kind of need our support much more. At a later stage where we have got involved in later rounds, it tends to be that they've got their CFO, they've got their team, they've got those things, but what they're looking for is that external insight, just going almost a sense check of kind of going, you're an experienced independent team that we can run this by, we can make sure that we're communicating everything in the right way so that we can put our best foot forward in our next round. And that's what they're valuing more than the building the model itself. It's kind of making sure it is communicating in the right way, and it's that communication angle that we go on. Because for us, it's financial models are financial model. Any financial professional can build you a half decent financial model. What we want to do is make sure that the figures and the narrative around that model is being pulled out in the right way, that all the information is being presented in a way that an investor can quickly pick it up, quickly understand it, and get a quick understanding of your commercial viability. And it's one part of, it's 1/6 of the process is the financial modeling. For us, it's much more about a communication project.
So is it true then, as you go towards those bigger rounds, that the issue you've got with the management team is that they're probably too close to it all?
Yeah, I think at all stages, whether you're a seed founder or Series A, Series B, is that you get very close to it, and you can't see the label from inside the bottle, as it were, and actually just having an external viewpoint of kind of going, is that really what you mean to say, or are you sure that that's the right plan, or you seem to be missing. You're not presenting certain information here that when we spoke, that sounded really exciting, and you're just not talking about it at all in your pitch. And often it's a case of just spotting those from an outside, those things that seem obvious to us. But
so you do a sort of a pitching pro. I mean, presumably you can do that on Zoom or in person, where they stand in front of you and do their pitch.
Yeah, we don't do presentation support. It's not really our bag in terms of kind of coaching people on their verbal presentation. We're looking more at the strategic information they're sharing, the narrative, the structure, the content that's in their documents.
So you're assessing their written
communication, the documentation, whether that be the business plan, the financial spreadsheets, the pitch presentation documents that we talked about. Our focus is very much there. We have partners that we work with who do kind of the standing up and talking kind of coaching and help them kind of get confidence in that.
But isn't that where you're going to find the dissonance in the sense that you've it's kind of there in the document, but you're not stressing it in your pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a part that the founder needs to, we've got support on our support portal and things for clients to kind of help them sort of frame their spoken presentation. But
Sure.
generally speaking, we try to avoid putting founders down a route of having some kind of scripted presentation. We find that through the process with us, we're digging into so many parts of the business. You can kind of think of it as a dry run of the due diligence process you'd have with an investor, because we're digging into this to try and sort of make sure everything ties together. And then we're filling those gaps with them and working with them to kind of come up with this full comprehensive business case. So by the time they're finished working with us, they kind of feel like they really know their business inside and out, and they can just talk to people about it. And for me, that's the best thing to do, is kind of get yourself in front of an investor in a meeting. They want you to do a presentation, keep it really short and sweet, and get to Q&A as soon as possible, because that's when they get to connect with you. That's when you actually get to have conversations with them rather than just speak at them. So that would normally be.
We've kind of talked about pitching to investors, but how do they and you, for them, find investors?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways. The best approach is warm introductions. It's the hardest to achieve, but by far, if you can get a warm introduction to an investor, that's going to go a long way. There's a few strategies you can do to kind of hack yourself into some introductions if you don't have a network that's well connected with investors, and it takes some time, so you have to start preparing way ahead. But you could build a target list of investors using tools like Crunchbase, and then you could, through tools like Crunchbase, you can find out who their portfolio companies are, and then you can connect on LinkedIn with the founders of those portfolio companies, strike up a conversation, offer to take them for coffee or for lunch, get to know them, and then eventually ask for introductions to their investors. The second kind of best approach that we've found, and this is very much a new approach kind of post-COVID, and that's that COVID forced everyone to stop doing kind of meetings face to face and only really working with individuals within their vicinity, within 10, 15 miles of their office. And it opened up a global investor network. And what we've found is by doing kind of email outreach, using tools like Crunchbase to build a list of hundreds of potential investors all over the UK, all over the world, that meet your criteria, that have a track record of investing in your space. You can do kind of a large scale kind of direct outreach and think of it as a direct marketing campaign, and start reaching out to those investors, showing them the proposition, and jumping on a Zoom call, getting to know them before you then kind of arrange a face-to-face, perhaps after 2 or 3 Zoom calls. So that's opened up a huge opportunity, and that's what we do. So we build out investor target lists of hundreds, if not thousands, of potential investors, and then do a ghost written email outreach campaign on founders' behalf. So as far as they're concerned, it comes from the founder, and then the founder picks up the responses from there, books the meetings, and takes the conversation forward. And we're kind of there in the background, kind of as their guide, just kind of in their ear. And if they're asking for this information, what should I say and say back, we can kind of give them that kind of support and guidance to help them manage the investor in the best way.
Okay, James, we've talked about the book. We've talked about the last 2 or 3 years while the book's been on the market. But look, wind the clock back further. How did you get into all of this sort of stuff?
That's a really good question. So my career started in branding and advertising. I was a designer at brand and advertising agencies. That's where I met my business partner, Nick, who was a creative director at top 10 advertising agencies in London, and has worked on campaigns for brands like British Heart Foundation and Jaguar and Tesco and all of these kind of awesome campaigns. So Robot Mascot started life about 10 years ago now as a full service kind of brand communication agency. We were doing TV campaigns and radio campaigns and brochures and adverts and all kinds of stuff. And we always wanted, our philosophy was to always work with what we call pioneers, the entrepreneurs that wanted to push the boundaries, do something different, not necessarily tech, but just entrepreneurs that were doing something exciting and different. And that led us into the world of tech. That also led us to founders who were raising investment, and they asked us to help them with their pitch decks because we'd kind of written the copy for their website or something like that. So could you do our pitch deck as well? And we went, sure. How hard can it be? I've watched Dragon's Den loads of times. Like how hard can it be? So then we had to obviously research the target audience. We realized it was quite a complex world, but started getting some really good results with these pitch decks. Investors were commenting that they wished every pitch deck in their inbox landed would look like the ones we were sending out. And we realized that there was something there that the industry just didn't have. And that led to a sort of 18, 24-month period of research where we were really kind of getting to know investors and founders who hadn't secured funding to kind of find out what worked and what didn't work. And that's how we kind of formulated these 6 principles and realized that actually our skill set around brand communication layered on top of business strategy, financial strategy, and those types of core elements. But having that layer of communication on top was something different, something new to the market, and something very much needed from an investor's perspective, because they were getting inundated with sort of 50 pitch decks into their inbox every day, and they just didn't know which ones were the ones that they should be kind of moving forward with. They were lacking inspiration. It was just there was no cut through, and we needed to solve that problem.
Brilliant.
It's a fascinating area, and I have to say, one of the things that you've done really well is break down the sort of process by which a founder can actually start thinking about bridging this idea. They've got this business idea and they want to get money for it, and you've started to build that bridge. Does that bridge have any holes in it that you still want to fix?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think we've recently looked to fix. There was probably a gaping hole at the end of the bridge, or the next bridge wasn't established, and that was the investor outreach piece. So we started live. Yeah. The first thing we did was create pitch decks. Then we realized that you're getting meetings but not closing deals, so you need the business plan and the forecasts to make that happen. So we added that on, and then we're like getting to the end of that, and all clients were saying, well, where do we find investors? How do we get in front of them? So then we added on the investor outreach services. So we now feel like we've got those 2 kind of chasms crossed. We've got bridges across those 2 kind of killers. We call them the investment killers. Not being able to communicate your proposition to investors properly, and the second one being not being able to find investors to pitch to in the first place. We solve those 2 things. I think the next thing for us would be, now you've got investors, you need to prime those investors to follow on in your next round, and you need to be really good at communicating with them monthly or quarterly on your progress, and keeping the excitement alive and keeping them updated with the vision and the progress and all of those things. So there's probably an argument for us to say, well, we need to continue that communication journey beyond the raise to prepare to kind of keep those investors engaged, ready for the next round, so that they'll follow on when the time is right. And if you need to go back to them for some more cash, they'll be willing to do so. So that's probably the next gap we see that we could probably do something with. But I think that's a few years out for us at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're making great progress, and to be honest with you, you're very young. So basically, from that point of view, you've got loads of years of fundraising. Can you see your business model changing? So I mean, somebody once said to me, he said, "Well, Graham, you help people with marketing and so forth. Do it yourself. Create your own product. I mean, in other words, you've got this skill set here. Have you ever thought to yourselves? I'm sure you must have done. We've got this fantastic business, or we have this idea, etc. We know how to do it." Have you ever taken yourselves through the process?
Yeah, I think honestly, right now, I've got a young family, and I know once you start from experience, once you start to bring external investors on, it's a very different culture in a business, and it's a very different mindset, and you have to be, and for me, I don't feel at the right time for me. I want to focus my time and energy on my family and this business. Sure. I think there's bound to be a point where we're able to take more of a step back from Robot Mascot ourselves and set up something that's a bit more of rather than a consultancy, more of a high growth kind of style business, and inevitably raise investment for it. And that will be, then once we exit Robot Mascot, or when we're able to take more of a personal exit, we keep the company, but take a personal exit and then go do something new. I think that's bound to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. But right now, my focus is on Robot Mascot and my family, because I know the pressures, and they're only young once, and you've got to enjoy it while it lasts.
That is a very interesting question that you should ask yourself early on that entrepreneurial journey. Why are you doing this? And a lot of our audience, Graham, are corporate escapees. They've escaped corporate, set up their own business to achieve a certain lifestyle. Now, there's, as you've just said, a big difference between that lifestyle of working as a solopreneur or that of a small company that isn't necessarily bothered about growing big, to that lifestyle that comes along with the investment coming in, the pressure from investors. Let's face it, investor invests on day one with the view of getting their money back in spades on day 1,000.
Yeah.
And the pressure is on to make sure you deliver.
Yeah. And that's something that we've become much more aware of as we've grown as over this business over the last 10 years. And that, I think that's, we mentioned earlier that a lot of our clients are that kind of 35 plus, and they're the corporate escapees, as you call them, a lot of the time. And they're at a different stage of life. Their family, their kids are grown up. They're kind of teenagers now, and they're now looking to kind of do something new and exciting. They've spotted an opportunity within that corporate world that could be a highly scalable solution to a problem that's quite a big one within that corporate sphere that they come from. And I think that's why we attract those types of clients. And for me, it's just not the right time. It is for some people, but I've got
I just felt sure that you'd done it already, James, because you've got the most huge microphone that I've ever seen. I mean, you can see it in the anybody watching this. I was going to put it out of the way now, is it? But Kevin would love that kind of thing. I mean, I've got an old-fashioned one that cost me about 30 quid, but no, it's. You just have to project your voice. But
I'm doing these sorts of things very regularly. I'm presenting on Zoom at least weekly to live events, so I've got to have the setup.
Oh, that's nice.
There's hardly a day goes by that I'm not on Zoom 2 or 3 times. So the decent microphone is tools of the trade.
Absolutely, you've got to have the right setup.
Well, yeah. Eventually, Kevin, when we get up to our 500th episode, then I'll probably invest in a new one. Or maybe not, but no. It honestly,
you're a
James,
Yorkshireman with Scottish roots, Graham. You never invest in anything.
Well, I do, but it's just they don't always come out. But what can I say? I actually did a campaign very recently where I stuck a penny to a postcard and sent it out to various people, and say a penny for your thoughts. Now, I'm thinking that the next one I should do is sticking a 2p on there, saying, I've been thinking about the penny for the thoughts, and I want to really invest in your idea. So here's 2p. But
that's inflation for you. Cost of living crisis costs you 2p these days.
Well, that's the copy. You're writing the copy for me. But I honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure, Jay. You are, and I've got to say, having got the book, I found it really interesting. There's lots of structure in there, lots of sort of step by steps. And on this podcast, you've shared a number of them, and I for one want to thank you for being on the Next 100 Days podcast.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved it.
So, Graham, that was certainly one for our corporate escapees, the ones that might be beyond the stage of small families with a great idea, and you're in corporate. All of this fundraising thing is something you just aren't taught. You might have a great idea, you might have the great corporate skills, but you're out there, you've formed your own business. Somebody like James is an ideal resource to be able to get you in front of the people with the money to finance your venture.
Yeah, I mean, if he increases the odds of successful fundraising, then his fees seem quite modest. And that idea of going to
quite modest, because I was expecting, not knowing before we spoke to him what his fees were, I was expecting much more.
Well, that might be that might be a pointer to him that maybe there's an opportunity, and I'm sure they've thought about this, but maybe there's an opportunity for a much more costly version of his services. But I think he sort of alluded to that. But having said that, the opportunity to get somebody like James and Robot Mascot to actually help you, create the ideal pitch deck, and also sort of having that outreach element of it as well. Very interesting, and so something that new businesses who are looking for founder money, then basically, this is a podcast for you then. And I've just completely cocked that up. I'll try that again. So yes, Kevin, another great podcast, this time with James Church, who is author, speaker, and Robot Mascot co-founder. So been quite interesting today, Kevin.
Absolutely. And I thought, when I saw Robot Mascot in the diary, I was thinking, who on earth are we talking to? Are we actually talking to this AI creation that you keep telling me I am?
Yeah, well, I mean,
we got a real person.
He's actually won the Business Advisor of the Year award. Which
I was going to ask him about that, and we ran out of time.
Yeah, well, and he'll only brag about himself. We don't want him to do that on the podcast.
Right.
But we'll leave all the bragging rights for us too. So today I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.